4 new Vault Hunters are arriving in Borderlands 4. I have no idea who I'm going to pick, so to help me and help you decide on which Vault Hunter to play, we'll cover their skills, playstyles, and more today. Let's go! Let me know in the comments who you are picking, and we'll start with Vex. Now, Vex wields supernatural phase energy to devastating effect. Vex can use the energy to empower herself or channel it to conjure deadly minions that fight alongside her. Now, Vex is the Siren for Borderlands 4, but quite different to the Sirens that we have in the past in that she acts kind of as the pet class for Borderlands 4 because of her skills. We'll start with the 4th Seal skill tree, which has the Dead Ringer action skill. Now, this has multiple things you can do with it, but when you use this skill, it will spawn a phase clone minion, choosing between a Spectre or a Reaper. The phase clones lose an ever-increasing amount of health per second, and their damage type matches Vex's current attunement when spawned. The Reaper variant of this will spawn a giant Reaper that has a scythe that can taunt enemies and deals melee damage, versus the Spectre, which does gun damage and cannot move in place. So you've got the option there depending on what you're fighting, and also a little bit maybe depending on solo play, right? Like let's say you're playing solo, you might want to use that Reaper more often so you can taunt enemies away from you so that you can heal, keep yourself alive. Whereas if you're using this as a bit more of like a run and gun build, maybe in co-op, then the Spectre with that gun damage is maybe the direction you want to go. Vexcalation is her second skill line with the skill Incarnate. Vex creates a phase explosion, dealing damage to nearby enemies and fully restoring her health. While active, Vex can use Eldritch Blast and gains increased movement speed. Eldritch Blast fires from her offhand, dealing damage to nearby enemies on impact, and dealing gun damage reduces Eldritch Blast cooldown. Essentially, this is just like a warlock, right? Like it's just Eldritch Blast, shooting it from your offhand, using it in combination with your guns, definitely in a run and gun sort of build, but also you get that health back from the skill line itself. Here Comes Trouble is the final skill line for Vex with the phase familiar. Vex is joined by her minion Trouble. When killed, Trouble will respawn after a cooldown. Now, Trouble is always active when you have this skill, but pressing the action skill will teleport Trouble to an area, dealing damage in that area, and transforms into a badass, fully restoring health and gaining increased damage for a duration, essentially becoming a big trouble. Now, one thing to note, just like in Borderlands 3, all of these skills, like the action skills in the skill trees, will have augmentations that you can use to modify these skills by adding additional effects, maybe changing the element type of damage that they do. And we won't go too deep into those as we'll get too much into the weeds here. And I just want to give you a high level detail of all the different characters, give you a sort of an overview of which one that you want to play. Something that is new to Borderlands 4 is the Vault Hunter trait. So this is a passive trait that is unique to all of the Vault Hunters. For Vex, she has Phase Covenant. Now, Vex is attuned to the elemental type of her current gun, converting all action skill and melee damage into that type. So say, for example, if you're fighting an enemy that has shields, if you're using a shock weapon, which is highly effective against shields, this will also tune her action skill and melee attack damage into that damage type as well. Now, if you're thinking about playing as Vex, really this is a great class for solo play because of the pets and the summons that can help you taunt enemies away from you, also deal a little bit of extra damage for you, plus the way that she can heal with Incarnate if you wanted to go down that route as well. But it's also a little bit of a necromancer fantasy because, you know, you can summon those minions like the Spectre and the Reapers, and I think because of the flexibility in her kit and the nature of having, you know, a cute pet, Vex will definitely be one of the more popular choices. A lot of her minor skills focus around lifesteal and a little bit of gun damage and that elemental effects as well, plus buffing her minions. So if you really like minion builds and having companions, Vex will be fantastic as well. And I do think in terms of gun usage, you're probably going to lean somewhere in the SMG assault rifle category. A lot of there is sort of more flexible weapons that you can use from a mid to close range and a little bit of distance as well, because, you know, depending on what sort of build you go, you'll definitely run and gunning a lot with Vex rather than getting up close and personal too much, because you've got those minions that you're going to get into that close melee range for you. Rafa the Exo-Soldier uses high-tech weaponry built into his dead frame exosuit. Rafa can blast enemies from afar using his Aphos lance arm cannon, perforate the opposition at mid-range using his shoulder-mounted Peacebreaker cannons, and unleash eviscerating melee attacks up close with his twin arc knife energy blades. Those are a breakdown of the 3 skills, but we'll go deeper into them, starting with the Aphos lance. This is in the people person skill tree. Equip Rafa's Aphos lance an offhand arm cannon that decreases Rafa's gun handling, but allows him to fire piercing shock ordnance blasts. Any unused charges when the lance ends are converted into action skill cooldown. Now, this has flexibility in how you choose to use it. You can just press the action skill to blast it out that, or you can hold it to charge up that lance for increased damage, projectile size, and projectile speed at the cost of those unused charges. I think what you'll find with these 3 skill lines with Rafa is the flexibility in his kit. The lance, for example, is quite a long range skill that you'll be able to use. Say if you want to hang back, use sniper rifles, those maybe slower, like semi-automatic weapons, then he'll have benefits for that with something like this. Or you could say run and gun in that mid-range with the remote agent skill line for the Peacebreaker cannons. So this equips the shoulder-mounted Peacebreaker cannons, which fires at enemies in front of him for a duration, dealing kinetic gun damage. Rafa can end the cannons early to refresh some of that action skill cooldown. So again, that run and gun mid-ground sort of skill line, using a high fire rate weapon, running around, dealing a lot of gun damage, and essentially just trying to, keep moving that whole time, which is great for Borderlands 4 because of all the new movement mechanics that have been added into this game. Arc Knives is the last skill tree. Now, this is called this year's gimmick skill tree. The Rafa puts down his guns and equips his Arc Knives. These blades deal melee damage and mark enemies wherever they damage them, causing them to take increased damage for every mark on them. Now, Rafa has some unique movement while he has these active, so you can perform melee attacks with the Arc Knives. You can dash forward and perform a shock melee attack. And to finish, you can unleash Rafa's Blade Fury, which deals shock damage to all marked enemies and ends the skill. And there are augments to this skill line to change that shock damage into another element as well. The Vault Hunter trait here for Rafa is Overdrive. Whenever Rafa activates an action skill, he enters Overdrive. While an action skill is active, Overdrive's duration does not decrease. While Overdrive is active, Rafa gains increased movement speed and deals increased damage with all sources. So movement is very important for Rafa, and the devs have described Rafa as the most agile Vault Hunter to date. Think of this as maybe a rogue archetype because of those arc knives, but a lot of flexibility in how you want to play Rafa. I think if you're not exactly sure whether you want to play close range, long range, use snipers, or what sort of weapons you want to use, Rafa will see a lot of success because there's a lot of flexibility. And say if you wanted to play close range, maybe with a shotgun, and then use the arc knives for that melee action based skill. Maybe you wanted to play in the long range, you've got the lance that we discussed, or even just that mid range variation. Maybe you just have no idea what you want to use anything you like. The Peacebreaker cannons will definitely help by increasing your overall DPS and allowing you to play in that flexible range with the movement speed increases that you get as well. Though it is worth noting that it has been described that he has a lot of skills that do focus on explosions and grenades. So if you do like using rockets, grenades, etc. in Borderlands, then he will probably be one of the best options. Harlowe The Gravitar uses her collection of clever contraptions. Harlowe has a huge impact whether she's crowd controlling enemies with cryo or radiation damage or enhancing her allies' survivability. We'll start with the Chroma Accelerator from the Creative Burst skill line. This fires an unstable energy pocket from Harlowe's Chroma Accelerator. The unstable energy pocket passes through enemies and deals cryo damage to all enemies it passes near, and pressing the action skill causes the unstable energy pocket to explode and deal heavy radiation damage in a large area. Fantastic for lining up headshots with snipers or things like that, because you can freeze the enemies in place with that cryo damage and line up those beautiful headshots. So a great crowd control ability that if you wanted to lock enemies in place and then line up those high damage headshots, it's fantastic for use. 0 Point is the action skill for the Seize the Day skill line. Pressing the action skill to use Harlowe's Halo Accelerator to place an enemy in stasis for a duration. Enemies immune to stasis take damage instead. Those enemies that are immune to it would be like some certain bosses, things like that. And then if you press the action skill again, you'll cause that enemy in stasis to be slammed into the ground in the direction Harlowe is facing, creating a small explosion. Again, another crowd control option to lock enemies in place by using that to lock them in stasis for a period of time. Fantastic to say lift them up in the air and then melt them with as much damage as you possibly can while they're stuck in that stasis animation. The Flux Generator from the Cosmic Brilliance skill tree throws her Flux Generator in front of her, which projects an energy field, dealing cryo damage over time and entangling enemies. Allies inside the energy field gain overshield. So a little bit of a support ability there. Cryo damage again, which is a theme for Harlowe, and the entanglement, which if you're wondering what entangling enemies does, we learn this from her Vault Hunter trait Entanglement. Whenever Harlowe uses her action skill on enemies, those enemies become entangled, and entangled enemies share a portion of gun damage and skill damage with all other entangled enemies. So again, think of something like, say, if you're using a sniper rifle to deal exceptional damage of headshot damage, and then you share that damage across enemies, definitely a build potential for that. But then also, any other types of damage that you're doing, but that high amount of damage burst will be fantastic for entangled shield enemies. So Harlowe is a combat scientist, and all of her abilities are based on using that entanglement feature, plus like the crowd control of locking enemies in place. And she's definitely one of the better, say, long-ranged options if you're maybe thinking about using some sort of a sniper. Even rockets to some degree would be fantastic for Harlowe, as she can lock enemies in place. You can make sure you can hit them with that high amount of burst damage. But also she's probably the best support Vault Hunter, because she can instant revive allies as well with her action skill and heal them with certain augments on some of these skills as well. So if you're playing in co-op, I think Harlowe will be a fantastic option if you want to keep your allies alive, heal them, revive them over time, things like that. But maybe you just want to hit things with a big axe, and that is where Amon The Forgeknight comes into play. As a highly customizable tank, Amon can use his weaponized drones to adapt to any situation, including a wide range of forge skills that add an extra layer of utility to each action skill. His forge arsenal lets him attack or defend as needed, ready to pulverize enemies with a forge hammer, slice them to twain with forge axes, and soak up damage with his forge shield, and much, much more. That's really the fantasy of Amon, is using these medieval style weapons in a fantastical, very Borderlands sort of way. Starting with Onslaughter, which is the Calamity skill tree action skill, Amon overloads his Forge Fist, gaining constant shield regeneration, bonus incendiary damage with guns, and increased movement speed. And when you press that action skill or melee to Rocket Punch, dashing to target enemy, dealing incendiary melee attack damage in a short range cone and causing stagger. Bosses can't be staggered, and badasses have a chance to be staggered. Now, something that's going to come up quite a lot in Amon's skills and just his overall play style is it's very Doom orientated. Reminds me a lot of the Doom Slayer, especially having, you know, this Rocket Punch, this like Forge Fist that he can use, plus some of the other skills very much remind me of Doom the Dark Ages. So if you did enjoy the gameplay loop of Doom the Dark Ages, you're definitely going to enjoy Amon. Scourge is the action skill for the Vengeance skill tree. Amon equips a Forge Shield that absorbs all frontal damage as Vengeance. Whenever the Vengeance meter is filled, Forge Shield provides a damage reduction instead, and Vengeance drains rapidly if it has not been gained recently. And when you press that action skill, you can launch a Forge Wave, dealing cryo ordnance damage to enemies it passes through, consuming Vengeance to increase damage dealt. Definitely the tanking based skill line, being able to absorb that damage and then dish it back out to enemies. So fantastic for a co-op style build, maybe to combine with Harlowe for her healing abilities as well. The Crucible is the action skill for the Cybernetics skill tree. Amon readies Forge Axes that can be thrown and picked up off the ground to refund cooldown. Now you can throw a Flame Axe that deals incinerate melee damage, or a Frost Axe dealing cryo melee damage. Enemies damaged by Forge Axes are primed for a duration and will detonate when they die, or are damaged by a Forge skill dealing damage to nearby enemies. This very much reminds me of, say, the Kratos axe throw, even, you know, the Thor hammer throw, obviously. Also kind of a little bit of Doom the Dark Ages, how you can throw the shield, you know. It's interesting how that comes up again. The Vault Hunter trait for Amon. Amon gains Forge skill depending on his equipped action skill. Forge skills can be activated by pressing and holding an action skill. So essentially this means that by holding that action skill, you'll gain an additional effect, which is different compared to the other Vault Hunters. So for the Onslaught action skill, which is the first one with the Forge Fist, press and hold action skill to slam a Molten Forge Hammer into the ground, dealing incinerate melee damage to enemies in a large area. For the Shield, Firewall is the trait. Press and hold action skill to deploy a firewall that absorbs enemy projectiles and creates friendly projectiles that pass through it, increase damage and projectile speed. Absorb damage is converted into Vengeance. If Scourge is active, enemies near Firewall take incinerary status damage over time. And for the Crucible, the Forge Axes, this is called Double Edge. Press and hold the action skill to throw a Twinned Forge Axe, dealing cryo melee damage to enemies it passes through, and returning to Amon, dealing incinerary melee damage on the way back. So when thinking about the playstyle here for Amon, he's definitely going to be quite berserker and tank orientated. You want to be very much in the thick of things. Think close range, using shotguns, definitely a lot of elemental damage focus on the skills themselves between fire and cryo, but then also you probably want to buff that with your weapons and your other skills as well. So excelling in that mid to close range, definitely want to be right in the thick of things. As I mentioned, it does really remind me a lot of the Doom the Dark Ages gameplay loop when playing as Amon, when you're looking at the gameplay footage. So if you did enjoy that loop in Doom the Dark Ages, you'll enjoy this character as well. And for me, I do think my first playthrough will either be with Amon or Vex. I think it's between those two for me, but do let me know in the comments who it's between for you. But thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.